Part 58. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 573. The Kui family is an old family. During the Li and Tang dynasties, the power and glory was only second to the Li family. But when the Tang dynasty fell, the Li family was the first to be hit, and the Kui family became the head of all the families. Emperor Sejong of the Great Zhou dynasty suppressed the family, and the Kui family became the most oppressed. Although they were suppressed for nearly 20 years, after Zhao came to power, they promoted the family, and they immediately became the top of the family. After De Zhou fled south, the Kui family also came out, and then settled in Dongting County. Along Dongting Lake, there are reclaimed fertile fields all around, and Dongting Lake has long been a fish and rice water town. Along Dongting Lake are rows of private houses. According to the data of the Imperial Court, the residents of Dongting County are equivalent to the number of people in a high-end city. It belongs to Shangshan County, which is superficial data, and it is not counted as a hidden household of the Kui family. The phenomenon of hidden households was repeatedly prohibited by the Imperial Court. During the Wei and Jin dynasties, the phenomenon of hidden households was the most serious because of too much emphasis on powerful families. Rich and wealthy families kept hermits in captivity to avoid national taxation, and the gentry of the family also took advantage of this to annex a large amount of land. Qi Ziyuan ordered that no more captivity be kept in captivity. In fact, he did not expect them to really register the hermits under their hands as citizens. Instead, they are warned not to take advantage of this chaos to keep more hermits in captivity. Otherwise he will be rude. Qi Heiran naturally also knew what the elder brother meant. He didn't understand these political affairs, and he didn't intend to intervene too much. Anyway, when he was asked, he would support the elder brother. He was more concerned about the reform of the military system. But since people have calculated everything to the surface, it is impossible for Qi Heiran to let it go lightly like this. He went to have a meal, but the three people in the box next to him were talking about how many hermits they had raised for the Kui family. All three were officials from Dongting County, who happened to be in charge of registering refugees. The voice happened to be able to make him hear it. Qi Heiran didn't know who was plotting against him, but obviously, that person mainly wanted to target the Kui family, not him. Qi Heiran directly ordered people to surround the Kui family and the Kui family's manor, including the county government of Dongting County. The reason was that someone had accused him of colluding with the Kui family and the county magistrate in rebellion. The walls of the Kui family's manor are as high as a city. If not for Qi Heiran's large number of people, who separated 6 groups of guards to guard the 6 gates, and caught them off guard, they might not be able to surround the Kui family. Qi Heiran didn't tell anyone to kill, but his actions already turned people pale with shock. Not long after, Kuiji, the patriarch of the Kui family, and Jin Xian, the magistrate of Dongting County, were kidnapped. The Kui family's descendants, young and old, were also tied up to guard not far away. Kuiji's eyes were red with anger, and he glared at Qi Heiran, asking, "What is General Qi going to do? What did my Kui family do wrong?" Qi Heiran snorted coldly, pointed at the family member of Kui's manor who was resisting with weapons, and said, "I also wanted to ask Patriarch Kui, what is the Kui family planning to do? Fei Bai, read the law of the Great Zhou to him." The brothers Qi Ziyuan haven't even chosen the name of the country yet. The law of the Great Zhou is still used in this law until now, and the law of the Great Zhou established by Emperor Sejong has the most restrictions on the family. There are requirements, and the weapons owned by the folk family are strictly restricted. Qi Heiran can see clearly that the people above are not holding hoes and sickles, but broadswords, bows, and arrows. When Fei Bai finished reading, Qi Heiran sneered and said, "I didn't believe you would rebel before, but now it seems that I can't help but believe it. If you want to rebel, what did you do 2 years ago? Now the bandit rebellion in the territory has been put down. You are the ones who want to oppose it. You are really stupid. Kuiji was taken aback, and immediately said, General Qi wrong, my Kui family is loyal to the general and has never had the intention of rebelling. Now that the world is at peace, how can we rebel at this time? Seeing the hesitant expression on Qi Heiran's face, Kuiji immediately continued his efforts. The general must have been confused by the traitor, and I would like to confront him. Qi Heiran snorted coldly, and said, confrontation is a confrontation, and the Lord will convince you to die. Come, go back to the camp and tie up those 3 people. Be careful, don't let anyone die. Kuiji thought that sure enough, Qi Heiran was indeed provoked to come here. At this time, he didn't care about getting angry with Qi Heiran, but quickly used his brain, thinking about who was going to target their Kui family like this, and unexpectedly came up with an idea. Such a vicious thing. Qi Heiran had already shifted his gaze to the Kui family, and said, Patriarch Kui, I have a question that I have been unable to understand. It just so happens that we are free now, so I will ask you for advice. Qi Heiran waved his hand and asked someone to pull Kuiji up to prevent him from kneeling. Kuiji heaved a sigh of relief and heard Qi Heiran ask, the walls of your manor are as high as a city, your Kui family, why doesn't my family live in it, but live in the county town instead? Kuiji's heart tensed instantly. He felt that the focus of Qi Heiran's question was mainly on the first half of the sentence, so he replied carefully, because of the unrest in recent years, this manor has been built so tall. Please invite General Qi, don't get me wrong, and Dongting County has the support of the imperial court, so Kui naturally rest assured that he will arrange his family to live in the county. But the news I got is that you conspired with Jin Xi and to rebel, took advantage of the opportunity to re-register the people's identities, lured the refugees, and concealed themselves as hidden households. In fact, they were recruiting troops. Kuiji and Jin Xi raised their heads with aha, feeling chills in their hearts. They did cooperate to turn the people into hermits. As long as those people heard that they don't have to pay taxes and only need to pay a little land rent, they are willing to come here with the land deeds under their names. So far, he has collected more than 300 households, including the previous ones. The hidden households can be equivalent to a high-class township. But from Qi Heiran's point of view, these people can be organized into an army. Kuiji's face turned slightly pale. He knew that someone had framed him for rebellion by taking advantage of his seclusion, but he didn't know how much evidence Qi Heiran got. Kuiji was still thinking about it, but Qi Heiran looked at the manor and said, Patriarch Kui, is it true or not? You only need to enter the manor to see if there are private soldiers and weapons inside. Just search once and you will be able to tell the truth. I have never had a bad temper, and I am not patient enough. Did you tell them to open the door, or did you just rush in? Kuiji's face became even more ugly. Jin Xi looked at him anxiously, but he couldn't say a word because his mouth was gagged. He didn't know what was in Kui's manor, but he knew that there were private soldiers and weapons. Private soldiers are hidden households, their servants, and there are about 4,000 people in them. Qi Heiran said that private soldiers are private soldiers, weapons, so need to say? Just look at the shining swords on the manor. Jin Xi burst into tears and regretted that he should not have conspired with Kuiji for that little benefit. Rebellion is the punishment of the 9 clans. Now that the order has not been restored, whether to rebel or not is often just a word from the superior, and history books will not be in the future. Get to the bottom. Jin Xi looked at Kuiji with some hatred, and then looked at Qi Heiran anxiously, hoping that he could take the things out of his mouth, because he had something to say. Kuiji lowered his eyes, unwilling to admit defeat, but when the 3 people who were arrested were escorted, Kuiji felt a chill in his heart, and all the luck in his heart was shattered. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 574. Kui Zhong is a side branch of the Kui family. he is the magistrate of the county government office. Half of the Kui family's acceptance of hermits has been handled by him. From what I said before, it can be judged that they are going to rebel. When Kuiji saw him, he began to suspect that someone had bribed the clansmen to frame the Kui family, so he turned his head decisively to Chi Heiran and said, "General Chi, can you take a step to speak?" Chi Heiran asked curiously, "Aren't you confronting each other? I think General Chi has misunderstood us. Kui wants to clarify one thing or two before doing this." Chi Heiran curled his lips, and waved his hands casually, asking people to clear away the people nearby, and the 3 people were naturally taken away, and when they were all empty, Chi Heiran said, "Just say anything, don't worry about it, take a step." Kuiji took a deep breath and knelt down to apologize. Compared with the rebellion, he is more willing to admit to taking in hermits. Anyway, everyone has done such a thing. Although the power of the Kui family is not as good as before, Chi Heiran didn't kill them at will. Chi Heiran snorted coldly after hearing him finish his charges, pointed to the closed gate of the manor and said, "How do you convince me that you are just taking in hermits and not rebelling?" Kui's Hilly immediately went forward and asked someone to open the gate. The gate opened and the suspension bridge was lowered, allowing Chi Heiran's army to enter. Chi Heiran went in and took a look at the facilities inside, but there was no expression on his face. Kuiji quickly handed in the roster of hidden households, which were only collected in the past 2 years, and he did not bring out the previous ones. Chi Heiran just flipped through it and threw it aside. He called everyone in the manor, and asked Jin Xian to read Chi Ziyuan's will in public. There will be no punishment for the hermits who voluntarily stand up, and after being recorded in the roster, the Duyanjai land will not be reduced. From next year, there will be no tax payment for 3 years. As far as I know, if you stay here, the ground rent will not be reduced. Not a lot, right? There was a commotion underneath, and then quickly quieted down again. Chi Heiran took a booklet and tapped his palms, and continued, "Because of the war in the Great Zhou dynasty, a lot of miscellaneous taxes were levied in the past few years, which caused the people to live in poverty. Dare to promise, I dare to guarantee that the tax will not exceed half of last year's tax after 3 years." There was commotion again underneath, and it lasted for a long time. Chi Heiran raised his lips slightly, but did not stop him. "The family will not protect those hermits in vain. Those hermits need to put the land under the name of the family and act as the servants of the family. They also need to hand over part of the profit from the land to the family, commonly known as land rent. Land rent also increases with the increase of state taxation." The hermits who were entrusted to the Kui family also knew that the Kui family was not a good family, but in order to avoid heavier taxes, they could only do this. Now that they have better conditions, if they can be good citizens in an open and honest manner, of course they will not willing to be a slave. Seeing that the commotion below was getting bigger and bigger, Chi Heiran waved his hand to silence the discussion below, and handed the brochure in his hand to Fei Bai, who was holding several copies, and said inadvertently, "These brochures were handed over by Patriarch Kui. Mine, there is a roster on it, but the hermits who take the initiative to stand up are not treated the same as the hermits who are passively handed over. I am willing to give you a chance, and it depends on whether you can grasp it. I will stay here for 3 days, 3 days afterwards, the hermits who have not come forward should be dealt with as fugitives." Chi Heiran turned his head and glanced at Kuiji and Jin Xian, and said, "You don't have to worry about the Kui family's retaliation. Let's not say that the Kui family's conscience is not bad. As long as you are found by the master will not leave you behind. You don't care." Kuiji's eyes were full of evil. He handed over to Chi Heiran only 2 books of hidden households, but Fei Bai took 6 books in his hand, and the rest was obviously filled with books he randomly found, in order to let the people below people are confused, and then take the initiative to stand up. Kuiji's face was ugly, but he was wrong before, and now everything is wrong. Jin Xin even shrunk his neck and stood aside, hoping that Chi Heiran would forget about him. Chi Heiran didn't give Kuiji a chance to get in touch with the people under him, and directly locked him in the manor, and the people directly related to Kuiji were also locked up. The reason was that before the truth came out, it was better for everyone to avoid suspicion. On the other hand, he let his subordinates quietly confuse the people in the manor with strong mouths, making them all report that they are hermits and report all the fields they brought before. This made many slaves who yearned for freedom eager to move, and wanted to pretend to be hermits and sign up. Fei Bai and the school officers looked at each other and smiled, then whispered bewitchingly, "There's nothing wrong with it, anyway, the manor can't produce any definite evidence. Here, all hermits have a contract with the steward. To be a hermit, you have to sign a contract of sale to be a slave, and in order to reassure the hermit, the manor usually asks the steward in the manor to sign another contract with the other party, which states that they came to the manor and how many fields they brought. Although it is obscure, it is actually their proof as a hermit. Real slaves don't have that." But Fei Bai said, "Things are best forged, but this kind of document is easier. If you want it, I can get it, but this." Fei Bai rubbed his fingers, and hurriedly said, "I don't want too many, just brothers. We have been fighting in the south and north for the past few years, and we haven't even had a hot meal." So a family of servants exchanged a good meal of wine and meat for a forged contract. The servants also had information channels for the servants. Although there were soldiers patrolling the manor, the news spread among the servants who wanted to leave, and many of them secretly obtained forged documents. Even if the servants are like this, those hidden households are even more distracted, and Chi Heiran still has the register in his hand, because they don't know if their names are on it. They have all made up their minds to surrender. So, within 3 days, someone quietly found Jin Xin and other county magistrates who were not imprisoned that night and surrendered themselves. Chi Heiran's adjutant was right next to Jin Xin. Even if Jin Xin got the forged document, he didn't dare to expose it, so he just filled in his name. Now he only hopes that his family will not be harmed, so he is very obedient. Chi Heiran was a little stunned when he saw that things were going so smoothly, and an older general persuaded him, "The general should restrain himself, we are just catching up with a good time, if it is a peaceful time." He shook his head, in his opinion Chi Heiran's ability to go so smoothly is entirely due to coincidence at the right time, place, and people. It is a troubled time now. Chi Heiran just needs to say that the Kui family rebelled, and directly wipe out the Kui family, and the Kui family can indeed find physical evidence here. Even if there are people who question it, there will be no big trouble. Rebellion, just relying on this weapon and having private soldiers is far from enough. So he hoped that Chi Heiran could restrain himself a bit, and not make the scene too loud, and finally he couldn't stop it. Chi Heiran did listen to it, and told Fei Bai and the others not to go too far. It can hurt the Kui family, but don't force them to death. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 575. Chi Heiran pushed open the door that held Kuiji. Kuiji was sitting in front of the table. When he saw Chi Heiran, he just looked up at him, and then continued to lower his eyes. From the voices of the guards guarding the gate and the movement of coming and going at the gate, he also guessed that most of the assets of the Kui family were destroyed. So Chi Heiran can be regarded as his enemy. Chi Heiran didn't care about Kuiji's attitude at all, and sat directly opposite him and poured himself a cup of tea. Patriarch Kui should be glad that my son will be 1 year old next month, otherwise the Kui family will have a different ending. Kuiji's body felt cold, and he said in a deep voice, "General Chi, my Kui family has no intention of treason." "Who knows, anyway," someone from Qi got the news that the Kui family is planning to plot treason, and, do you really think that your Kui family can be kept without plotting rebellion? The things found in your study, even if your Kui family did not intend to plot rebellion, that is also the crime of copying and beheading. Kui Ji stopped talking. Qi Heiran snorted and said, if you want me to say, half of the great Zhou dynasty was destroyed in your hands, half of the officials in the south of the Yangtze River colluded with the gentry of your family, and the central part is the sphere of influence of Prime Minister Qin. The country has been divided up to this point. Death is strange. That's why Emperor Jinjian has no talent or virtue, Kui Ji said bluntly. Qi Heiran curled his lips, and said, Qi, no matter whether you are greedy and immoral, or Emperor Jinjian has no talent and no virtue, in short, now that the new dynasty is about to be established, what we want is for the people to live and work in peace and contentment, so it is best not to stretch your hands too long. How dare a child with a yellow mouth threaten him like this? Kui Ji, who has passed the age, looks ugly. Qi Heiran suddenly laughed and said, do you know why I am sure that your Kui family will rebel? Kui Ji raised his head to look at him. Qi Heiran said with a cold face, you can be tricked if you don't go and buy some small things. They want you to copy Kui's house, but I don't like what they want, so I don't want you to buy anything, said that your Kui family should be lucky. Qi Heiran got up and said, the cyclamen in Dongting County is your Kui family's property? The partitions in the box should be replaced. This time, I accidentally heard something that I shouldn't have heard. Next time I will. It was replaced by someone else. Kui Ji faced the cold water. Seeing Qi Heiran was about to leave, he hurriedly got up to stop Qi Heiran, and said, General Qi, can Kui keep the 3 people you took away? Qi Heiran frowned. Kui Ji gritted his teeth, and said, General Qi and his people are traveling eastward from Chengdu Mansion. There must be a lack of food and grass. Kui is not talented, so he is willing to support the army with 1,000 loads of food. Qi Heiran rolled his eyes and said, 5,000 dan. 2,000 dan. Seeing that Qi Heiran wanted to raise the price, he hurriedly said, General Qi, the Kui family has encountered a catastrophe this time, and 2,000 dan is already the limit. Qi Heiran curled his lips and said, your Kui family used to be greedy for things from the country. That's also greedy for Dezhou, not for you. Kui Ji cursed in his heart. Qi Heiran finally agreed, but said, 2,000 dan are only for 2 people. Kui Ji frowned. Qi Heiran laughed mysteriously and said in a low voice, don't worry, the 2 of you are definitely worth it. I still count on you to fight with them. If you need my help, then just ask. Brother Qi Heiran patted Kui Ji on the shoulder, as if he wasn't the one who was copying Kui's house. Kui Ji finally nodded, and after the 3-day deadline, Qi Heiran released the Kui family members, and the gate of the manor was destroyed. Seeing Kui Ji staring at the door, Qi Heiran explained, my lord originally wanted to open the fence. It was completely destroyed. After all, not only your servants of the Kui family live in it now, but also ordinary people. Why keep this fence? But since the 2 of us have cooperated, we should not make it too ugly. Left behind. Kui Ji, who was originally dissatisfied, heaved a sigh of relief. Qi Heiran handed over Kui Zhong and Huang Hu, who was obviously a traitor, to Kui Ji, and then took the remaining one to return to the dynasty. Before leaving, Qi Heiran stared at Jin Xian for a long time, and then said, Dongting County will be temporarily handed over to Mr. Jin. Mr. Jin should know what to do and what not to do. Although the general is kind, there is a limit to patience of. Jin Xian knelt down on the ground with tears in his eyes, and said sincerely, don't worry, General, I am willing to do my best for the general. Qi Heiran reluctantly showed a satisfied expression, beat the horse and left, but he was cursing in his heart. If it weren't for the fact that it is still in the founding period and the talent is withering, he would have chopped up such corrupt officials long ago. The Kui family was hit hard by this matter. Chi Heiran was ruthless, and almost two-thirds of the Kui family's fields were classified as hidden households, and they were divided out. In addition, those soldiers went on a rampage, and many of them moved to the Kui family. The Kui family dared to be angry and dare not speak out, and they all counted on Kui Ji to ask the court for an explanation after he came out. Unexpectedly, Kui Ji and Chi Heiran were chatting and laughing, de Wu, which seemed like a brotherly relationship, which made the rest of the Kui family very dissatisfied. But Kui Ji didn't explain anything. He first brought Kui Zhong in for interrogation. Kui Zhong swore that he just said something that day, recorded how many hidden households he had recorded, and how many people he planned to accept, and didn't involve a word of rebellion. Kui faced the coldness like water and asked, "You didn't say, what about the other two?" Kui Zhong's face froze, and he said, "Huang Hu just mentioned a word in passing, saying that our Kui family's hermits can form a large army. Even if the bandits in Zhongling Mansion make changes, our Kui family will not be afraid." Kui Ji really wanted to throw a teacup on his face. What is this not rebellious speech? But uncle, this is not the first time Huang Hu has said something like this. My nephew really doesn't know that there are people next door, and he can still hear what we say. Kui Ji said angrily, "I told you earlier, be more careful outside. You actually talked about such confidential things in cyclamen." Kui Zhong lowered his head and cried bitterly, "Uncle, Dongting County is our Kui family's world. How do I know that someone will plot against us?" "Shut up," Kui Ji said angrily, "you still say such things. No wonder Chi Heiran said that we can be sure that we are going to rebel." He only realized now that he had too little restraint on his tribe before, which made them so complacent. "Let me ask you, who proposed to go to cyclamen, and who booked the box?" "It's Huang Hu. As for the box, as long as my nephew goes to cyclamen, all he wants is that box, and the shopkeeper will always keep it for me." "After you were arrested, did Chi Heiran interrogate you?" Kui Zhong shook his head. Seeing Kui Ji's eyes showing doubts, he hurriedly said, "Although Chi Heiran has never interrogated me, he walked around me twice early the next morning, his mouth full of wonder, the expression on his face it was very strange, and then went out, and then my nephew heard the sound of troops being dispatched outside. Obviously they had interrogated other people. I'd like to see who plotted against my Kui family." Kui Ji's voice was as cold as ice. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 576. Kui Ji hated Chi Heiran who stole most of the Kui family's assets, but even more hated the person who plotted against the Kui family behind his back. As Kui Zhong said, Dongting County is the Kui family's world, and it is easy for them to check Chi Heiran's whereabouts. After the incident, he asked someone to investigate, and he naturally knew that Chi Heiran's army did not even enter the county gate, and he was stationed directly 10 miles outside the county and planned to continue his journey the next day. Like the previous county towns, as long as there were no bandits inside, he would pass through the door so as not to cause trouble to the people. And Chi Heiran brought people into the city because he wanted to buy gifts for his wife and children. He also quickly got the exact news. If the family rebels, all the following things will not happen. Chi Heiran will return to the imperial court early the next morning, so what should happen to Dongting County? Kui Ji has nothing to do with Chi Heiran now, but he will not let go of those who plot against the Kui family behind his back, so he urgently needs to know who is behind the scenes. After Kui Ji interrogated Kui Zhong, he went to interrogate Huang Hu. Huang Hu's situation is much worse than that of Kui Zhong's. He is covered in wounds, obviously being tortured, and this makes Kui Ji believe that it must be Huang Hu who provoked the relationship between Chi Heiran and the Kui family. Huang Hu was almost suffocated. After he was caught, he was gagged and locked up that night. The next morning, he was temporarily dragged out to be tortured. After interrogating him and beating him black and blue, he dragged him and the other two to Kui's manor. For the past 3 days, he has been locked up alone, and his mouth is free only when he eats every day. He wants to kill himself, but there are always people around him. Once he finally bit his tongue cruelly, but his jaw was quickly removed. Although a mouthful of blood was bitten out, it was not serious. The other party didn't even give him medicine, but the guards on him were stricter. At 12 hours a day, 6 people took turns staring at him, so that he couldn't find any gaps. He obviously didn't say a word, but Kuiji repeatedly interrogated what he said to Chihayrin and who ordered him. The Kui family has been standing for more than 600 years, and the methods of interrogation are even more cruel. Huang Hu couldn't stand the torture, so he told the person behind the scenes, but he really couldn't answer the first question. In the end, seeing that Kuiji was so persistent, Huang Hu could only talk nonsense. In short, he could say whatever he wanted to follow Kuiji. He was able to be the one who planted and framed him. Observing words and demeanor was the most basic thing. Part of the hatred was placed on the family that was behind the scenes. Thinking of what Chihayrin said before he left, Kuiji had the idea of cooperating with him. Those who can plot and have the guts to plot against the Kui family are naturally aristocratic. In Kuiji's view, the Kui family is already on the decline, most of the assets have been looted by Chihayrin, and the most important fields have also been attributed to those hidden households who left. It is impossible to get them back, at least impossible in 20 years. Rather than being suppressed by other clans, it would be better for the entire clan to be like their Kui family. At that time, everyone's starting point will be the same again, and the Kui family may be able to be the leader again. Kuiji is a family member, and he knows more clearly about the struggle of families than anyone else. If the Kui family does not fall, then it will only end up being swallowed up by other families. This is not the first time such a thing has happened. Now who knows the family of Wang Xie in the Jin dynasty? It's all because the resources of the two families have been annexed by several of their aristocratic families long ago, and now the direct branches of the two families can barely provide for their children to study, and no amount of resources will be available. Kuiji didn't want the Kui family to become like that under his hands, so he could only cooperate with Chihayrin to bring down other families before other families began to annex him. Anyway, the Chi brothers also want to clean up the hermits, don't they? Chihayrin, who was rushing to Linen City excitedly, didn't know Kuiji's thoughts, he just went home to see his wife and children. Behind General Chi's team, several bandit leaders were also talking about Chihayrin. The few people looked at the supplies behind them with complex expressions, and said with a tusk, "Soldiers, soldiers, how can you say that soldiers are bandits? You see, the Chi family army is worse than us bandits. Ruthless, we only robbed some food, gold, and silver and so on. I heard that they moved a lot of silver and food, and even distributed most of their land. How else can someone be a soldier, but you can only be a bandit? I can also serve as a soldier now, and I can become an official no matter what when I go back. Huh, just brag, it's not bad if you don't cut off your head. If you ask me, the Kui family deserves what they deserve. We are so poor because of their families and rich and powerful. If they didn't raise so many hermits, annexation of national taxes, maybe we don't have to pay so much taxes, we don't need to rebel, and we don't have to worry about it now. Pull it down, even if there are no such aristocratic families and wealthy landlords, the emperor will be stupid, build a palace today, and build another palace tomorrow, and then buy beautiful girls and so on. We have to pay more taxes, eat less, and finally have to rebel. Actually, I don't think there's anything wrong with rebellion. As long as we keep ourselves safe after entering Beijing, an official position is unavoidable. It's better than being a fool for the rest of our lives, right? Humph, you only see these benefits, but you don't look at how many people died. We have been bandits for 7 or 8 years. Look at how many people died along the way. How many people are still alive now? I'd rather the country live in peace and the people live in peace, even if I'm a mudleg, at least my family is still alive. The atmosphere was suddenly a little stagnant. Among the people present, more or less lost their families in the war, and some were even alone. There was a long silence, and someone broke the silence in a low voice, "I don't know if it will be peaceful this time. We don't want this prosperous age anymore, as long as we don't persecute the people too much like the previous Great Joe. No way, the general is not bad. I heard that he loved the people very much when he was in Bidi. Not only are there no bandits there, but at least the people will not starve to death." Someone hummed and said, "You'll know if you're starving to death? It's bitterly cold in the north, and people in the south of the Yangtze River starve to death. I don't believe there is no one in the north. It's just being concealed." There was a lot of noise in the back, but there was joy in the front. A scout rushed to report, "General, Linan City is about 25 miles ahead." The general sent guards to report, saying that he will personally lead all the officials to welcome you back to Beijing. Chi Heiran was happy, and he laughed loudly and ordered, "Tell people to speed up, and we must rush to the capital today." The smile on the scout's face paused, and he said in a low voice, "General, the general said that you should first settle down in a temple 10 miles away, and then formally enter the capital tomorrow. If you enter the city today, it will be very late." Teachers have always paid attention to the time when returning to the court. Generally speaking, it is best to enter the city after the sun rises, and before noon. If they enter the city today, it will be dark by then. Who will stand in the way to welcome them? The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 577. A lot of flower handkerchiefs were thrown on Chi Heiran's body. He had a dark face, but the girls and daughters-in-law who were watching screamed, thinking that he was even more handsome. Chi Heiran's face turned even darker. He calmly let the horse speed up, and he was relieved until he entered the imperial city. Chi Heiran brought the generals into the palace. Chi Ziyuan met them cordially, and then exchanged opinions on the situation in the whole country. Until the end of the meeting, Zhang Cheng tentatively asked about the Kui family. Chi Ziyuan seemed to remember it looking at Chi Heiran. Chi Heiran waved his hand indifferently and said, "Although the Kui family's rebellion has some certification and physical evidence, it is difficult to confirm whether the certification is correct because of the entanglement of forces, and the attitude of the Kui family is not bad, so Chi intends to give it to him. They have a chance to see the follow-up. If they really have the heart to rebel, they will send troops to encircle and suppress them at that time." Chi Heiran paused and said again, "Brother, Emperor Shizong of the Great Zhou once said that those with more than 50 hidden households are equivalent to rebellion. I think we should follow this law." Chi Ziyuan smiled and said, "We haven't determined the name of the country yet, and the new law has not been determined yet, so naturally we will use the Great Zhou law first." The ministers below felt chilled, and were about to suggest, but Chi Ziyuan got up and said, "I will not deal with political affairs when my younger brother comes back today. All the ministers and workers should also go back and reunite with their families. If there is anything to discuss, we will discuss it tomorrow." Chi Ziyuan took Chi Heiran back to Chi's house. Chi Heiran paused at the second gate, then turned his head and asked, "Brother, why don't you go to Dongfu?" Chi Heiran was asking if he wanted to greet Mrs. Wu. After all, that person was their mother in name. But Chi Ziyuan gave him a sideways glance, and said, "I've never seen you so filial before, but now that you have a high position and authority, do you care about these things?" Chi Heiran chuckled and said, "I don't want to cause trouble." "You don't need to think about me," Chi Ziyuan said with a cold look in his eyes. "I've never heard of a family whose son-in-law would greet his concubine after returning home. Let's go directly to Zayed Hall." Chi Heiran was taken aback, and immediately shouted, "Brother, I haven't seen Aling and the child yet. I'll go back to Zayahua courtyard to see them first, and we'll talk later in the evening." After speaking, he ran away in a hurry. Chi Xiuyuan gritted his teeth with hatred, and went back to Zayat Hall first, shaking his hands. Mu Yangling was holding a windmill and turning it for his son to see. His eyes drifted to the door from time to time, and when his ears caught the sound of quick but steady footsteps, Mu Yangling threw away the windmill in his hand. Like the wind he ran to the door and opened the curtain with a swipe. Chi Heiran's hand has also been raised, and was about to lift the curtain, who knew that the curtain swiped open, almost missed his eyes, and when he lowered his head, he met Mu Yangling's eyes, and scolded him just swallowed it. With a silly smile, he took Mu Yangling's hand and said, "Aling, I'm back." Mu Yangling also had a smile on his face, and threw himself into Chi Heiran's arms. Chi Heiran also hugged his wife tightly, looked around, and saw no one, so he tightened his arms even more reassuringly, and couldn't help kissing her hair bun. The little bear was completely stunned. He was still holding a windmill in his little hand. He looked down at the windmill thrown away by his mother, then turned his head to look at the parents who were hugging each other, and then became decisively angry. He threw away the things in his hands, turned over and lay down on the bed, ran over, stretched out his feet and kicked Chi Heiran, clenching his small fists and angrily screamed "Ah!" and beat him. Chi Heiran only felt a pain in his knee and couldn't help but bend over. He frowned slightly, pushed his wife away to look down at his son, lifted his son up to look at him, turned his head and asked, "Why is this kid so strong? It can hurt me." Mu Yangling's eyebrows twitched. "Impossible, my son didn't have much energy when he was playing with me." Seeing that she didn't believe her, Chi Heiran put his son on the couch, rolled up his trouser legs angrily, pointed to the blue color on it and said, "Look, your son just beat it. The small blue fist is the size of a fist, and it really looks like it was punched out by a son." Mu Yangling looked down at his son who was still angry, then looked at his hands, picked up his son's wooden horse, and broke it into pieces in front of his son with a click. Little Bear stared blankly for 2 seconds, then burst into tears with a "Wow." Chi Heiran immediately hugged him distressedly, and complained, "Why are you breaking his Trojan horse? Go to coax him again, my dear son, don't cry, Dad will buy you a new one, a bigger one, okay." The little bear howled dryly with his eyes closed, but Mu Yangling picked up another wooden horse and put it in his hand, saying, "Son, you can play with it too." The little bear touched the wooden horse in his hand, cried a little, and opened his eyes to see his mother. Mu Yangling encouraged him, "Son, try to see if you can break it." The little bear looked at the wooden horse in his hand, and then at the broken one in his mother's hand, and broke it hard. The first time the wooden horse didn't move at all, the little bear was stunned, then clasped his hands together and broke the wooden horse again. Chi Heiran was dumbfounded. "Our son has inherited your great strength, why didn't he find out before?" Mu Yangling also frowned, "I couldn't control my strength when I was a child. My mother said that when I was a few months old, I could smash a table with my hand. It wasn't until I was 6 years old that I gradually mastered the strength. Will it be just the opposite of me? You have to use subconsciously to exert that great strength." Chi Heiran thought about it for a while, then held his son and laughed, "It's no wonder that he is my Chi Heiran's son, he has been so powerful since he was born, ha ha ha." Mu Yangling's face was full of black lines, and he said, "My son inherited this from me, okay. That's because I was born with you." Chi Heiran hugged his son and was about to kiss him, but Xiaoxiang didn't know this stubble-faced, smelly, and dirty man, so he pushed his face away in disgust. He yelled ahh at his mother. Chi Heiran was shocked, "Boy, you don't even know Daddy, Daddy gave you so many things." Mu Yangling also coaxed him to call Chi Heiran Daddy, and it took Xiaoxiang a while to realize that the person in front of him was Daddy. Little Bear can't speak yet, but his attitude has softened a lot. Although he is still unwilling to stay in Chi Heiran's arms, he is willing to share his toys with him. The little bear stuffed him with several of his toys before he had time to complain to his mother. He held the windmill in his hand, pointed to the windmill that had been left aside, and shouted at Mu Yangling. Mu Yangling nodded while admitting his mistake, picked up the windmill, and promised, "Mother knows I was wrong, and I won't throw things around again next time." After repeatedly apologizing sincerely, he was forgiven by Little Bear. Then Little Bear snorted softly and continued to sit on the couch and play with his toys. Chi Heiran stood aside, frowning, and said, "Isn't the child about to be 1 year old? Why can't he speak? Boys speak late. But Xiaobao can speak at 8 months. Then our son will be able to stand up and walk in 7 months, Mu Yangling said softly. "You can't compare children with children, as long as they are happy. Since my son is still young, boys talk late, so it's okay to talk after the first birthday, and he called me mother before. Although he only called once, he can't teach him any more after that." You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 578. Li Shun stood outside the door, hesitated for a while, and interrupted the interaction of the family of 3 inside. "Fourth master, fourth grandma, the hot water is ready." Chi Heiran glanced regretfully at his son who disliked him, and pulled Mu Yangling up to go to the bathroom. Mu Yangling hurriedly withdrew his hand and said in a low voice, "What are you doing? Go and wash yourself." Chi Heiran had an expression of "you abusing me," gritted his teeth and said, "Are you going by yourself, or is my master carrying you there?" Seeing Mu Yangling glaring at him, he said aggrievedly, "How long has it been since I saw you?" Mu Yangling looked at his son hesitantly. Chi Heiran immediately picked up his son and handed it to Li Shun outside the door, saying, "Take the third young master to find the second young master." Little Xiong was still a little dazed, so he was sent to Zayat Hall by Li Shun. The grievances he had at first dissipated after seeing his brother, and he struggled to climb down Li Shun's embrace, and ran to hold hands with Xiaobao. The yard was full of people playing with mud, picking grass and picking flowers, and in a short while they all turned into cat faces, and they broke into Chi Xiaoyuan's study together hand in hand, shocking the servants who followed. Chi Xiaoyuan raised his head and glanced at the 2 children whose faces and hands were covered with mud, waved his hands to make the servants step back, got up himself, hugged the 2 children on his knees and sat down, took out a 3-character classic and said, "Come on, Daddy and Uncle taught you to read, at the beginning of human beings, nature is good. Little Treasure seriously followed his mouth and said, "At the beginning of a person, he is kind." Chi Xiaoyuan laughed, and taught it again seriously, "At the beginning of human beings, nature is kind." Xiaobao read it 3 times, and he has learned it. At least there will be no missing words or omissions. Chi Xiaoyuan looked at Little Bear, who was tilting his head to study the brush on his desk. Attracted, I reached out to take it, but couldn't because of my short arms. Chi Xiaoyuan brought it to him, and coaxed him, "Xiong, can you study with Uncle, at the beginning of human beings, nature is good. Guessing he was being soft on others, Xiao Xiong hummed along the tune in a very face-saving way, but they were all not even a decent word. Chi Xiaoyuan frowned, took the brush in his hand to wash, and said solemnly, "First study, and then I will play with you, at the beginning of human beings, nature is good. Little Bear was taken aback, looked up at Chi Xiaoyuan seriously, tilted his head and thought for a while, and then said Seeing that Chi Xiaoyuan still didn't give him something, he slapped the book in front of him with his little paws angrily. His little paws were printed on it. Chi Xiaoyuan has black lines all over his head, and was about to teach him, but he saw Xiaobao excitedly snatching the book and imprinting his little paws on it. When Xiao Xiong saw it, he didn't care about the pen wash anymore, and started to compete with Xiaobao who could print it. There are many handprints. but their hands were so dirty that they couldn't print anything after printing a few times. Both of them were very sad. In the end, Xiaobao looked at his palms and seemed to think of something. He struggled and slipped off his father's legs and ran outside. Squatting down under the astonished eyes of the servants, rubbed his little paws on the ground, then rushed back with his dirty little hand, struggled to climb up again to print the book, but the other person's balance was not enough, his hand was not, maybe he held it up, and finally grabbed his father's clothes, leaving dirty little paws on it. Now Xiaobao is not afraid anymore. Instead he tilts his head to look at the paw print on his father's sleeve, and as if suddenly enlightened, he presses his little hand towards Qi Xiaoyuan's chest. When the little hand was removed again, a small shallow handprint was left on Qi Xiaoyuan's chest. Xiaobao laughed happily. Little Bear was watching all the time, and couldn't sit still when he saw this. He quickly broke away from Qi Xiaoyuan's arms, ran out with Xiaobao to get muddy, and then came back to print on Qi Xiaoyuan's clothes. Qi Xiaoyuan's face was as black as coal. He finally took a deep breath, suppressed the reprimand. He told himself that the child is still young and not sensible. When Li Jinghua came over, he saw two boys laughing and tugging at Qi Xiaoyuan's clothes. Li Jinghua smiled knowingly, and was about to say that the relationship between the uncle and the children had gotten better, when he saw the densely packed little girls on Qi Xiaoyuan's clothes. The paw prints, and the words that came to his mouth were swallowed. She twitched the corners of her mouth. It was time for someone to take the two children down to take a bath and change clothes. At this time, Mu Yangling was rubbing Qi Heiran's back. Mu Yangling said with distressed and disgusted face, "How many days have you not bathed?" She has changed the water for him twice, and the third time the water is a bit normal. She almost didn't rub his skin. Qi Heiran lay comfortably in the wooden barrel, and said comfortably, "I can't even drink hot water, where can I get water to take a bath?" He counted in his heart, and said, "The last time I took a bath, I still saw Big Brother. Finally, our brothers recently found a small stream to wash coldly, so it's easy to wash in such a cold day." Mu Yangling was stunned, and said, "Isn't it a month?" Thinking that the weather is getting hotter now, and Qi Heiran is on the road and at war, sweating is indispensable, but he hasn't washed for a month. Qi Heiran saw Mu Yangling's look of disdain, which coincided with the look of his precious son's dislike just now, and suddenly became angry from embarrassment. "How dare you dislike me?" After that, he stretched out his hand and pulled Mu Yangling into the barrel. Mu Yangling screamed, and when he came back to his senses, he saw that his whole body was wet, so he pinched him angrily. "What are you doing? My clothes are all wet, right?" Qi Heiran got angry, stretched out his hand to pull her clothes, and said, "It's better if it's wet, wash it together with the master, it just saves water. You don't know how precious the water is when we march and fight. Want to drink more, you have to save every bite." When Qi Heiran said this, Mu Yangling's dislike turned into distress, and his attitude inevitably softened. Seeing this, Qi Heiran tightened his entanglement. He hugged Mu Yangling. His breathing gradually became short of breath, hot air sprayed on her neck and ears, and he said in a low voice, "Aling, I miss you." Mu Yangling paused slightly after pushing his hand, and said in a low voice, "Don't stay here, we will be laughed at." "No one is outside, and who dares to laugh at us?" Qi Heiran said, and he had already peeled off Mu Yangling quickly, kneading with his hands up and down. Mu Yangling's face was flushed, shy and timid, and finally simply close your eyes and let him do what you want. Qi Heiran liked it better, hugged her tightly, and whispered in her ear, "I'm so happy, you're so good." Mu Yangling's face was flushed red, but Qi Heiran's kisses fell like raindrops. When Mu Yangling was slightly absent-minded, he raised her legs, rushed in, and then attacked vigorously. Mu Yangling's whole head was buried in Qi Heiran's chest. When he was holding him on the bed, he pulled the quilt and buried himself in it. Qi Heiran patted the quilt with a satisfied face and said, "I'll ask someone to come in." Tidy. Mu Yangling shrank like a quail, pretending not to hear. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 579. Water was spilled everywhere in the bathroom, and clothes were also thrown all over the floor. Seeing that his wife was really shy, Chi Heiran reluctantly picked up the clothes and put them aside before letting someone in to clean them up. The girls who came in to tidy up cleaned up the bathroom without looking sideways. When they went out, their faces were a little flushed. Wang Ma stared outside with a pair of sharp eyes, and the redness on the faces of the girls suddenly turned white. Only then was Wang Ma satisfied, and told Gu Yu to guard the door, and left. Putting on his underwear, Chi Heiran went to pour water by himself, poured 2 cups in a row, and then came back with the teapot, and asked, "Do you want some water?" Mu Yangling lifted the quilt and glared at him, saying, "Don't drink." However, Chi Heiran was distracted by Mu Yangling's stare. Looking at Mu Yangling, he poured himself another glass of water with a wave of his hand. Then he dropped the teapot and cup, climbed onto the bed and hugged Mu Yangling. His hands were dishonestly messed up. "Get moving." Mu Yangling pushed his hand away and warned in a low voice, "I'm going to Zayed Hall for dinner later, don't mess around." Chi Heiran withdrew his hands regretfully, pressed Mu Yangling in his arms, leaned over and kissed her fiercely, then lay down and hugged her and said, "Sleep with me for a while. How long has it been since I slept peacefully? It's..." After Chi Heiran finished speaking, he snored loudly. Mu Yangling couldn't sleep, so he moved his body, turned his face to him, looked at him for a long time, stroked his cheek with his hand, and saw that the cutest baby fat in his past had disappeared, and his heart ached immediately, couldn't help but raised his head and kissed his cheek. Chi Heiran smashed his mouth, and tightened his hand holding Mu Yangling. Mu Yangling watched and fell asleep with his pillow on Chi Heiran's chest. When he was woken up again, only the setting sun was left outside. Mu Yangling quickly got up, shook Chi Heiran awake, and the two of them simply packed up and went to Zayed Hall together. Because of Chi Heiran's triumphant return, Li Jinghua ordered the kitchen to cook a lot of delicious food. The 2 children had been fed in advance, and now they were sitting on the couch playing together. One of them occupied Chi Ziyuan's side. Chi Heiran paused as he entered the room, and looked at his son sadly. He didn't expect his son to be so good with his elder brother, but to despise him so much. Chi Ziyuan raised his eyes to look at him, and it was written all over his face when he thought about it, and the corner of his mouth twitched, but he hugged the little bear tightly, and asked softly, "Little bear, can you still play with uncle tomorrow?" Little bear nodded fiercely, and even put his arms around Chi Ziyuan's neck and kissed him. Obviously, he was very satisfied with the hand-printing game this afternoon. Chi Heiran was even more shocked, and after greeting Li Jinghua, he rushed over to the couch, called Big Brother, and leaned over to coax Little Bear, "Son, look here, do you remember Daddy?" Chi Ziyuan said indifferently, "When you left, the child was not yet born, how could you remember?" But Xiaobao looked up at Chi Heiran, and shouted crisply, "Fourth uncle!" "Hey," Chi Heiran responded happily, and then looked at his son expectantly. The little bear still couldn't speak, but just chatted with Xiaobao, and when he turned his head, Chi Heiran was still looking at him eagerly. After a while, he finally gave Chi Heiran his favorite wood carving with a face full of pain. Chi Heiran was very disappointed with the wood carving given by Little Bear, but Mu Yangling, who brought the fruit over, said in surprise, "Little Bear gave you this thing? I asked him for a long time, but he was not willing to give it to me." Chi Ziyuan looked at Chi Heiran with a disappointed face, and said with a cold snort, "You're lucky." Chi Heiran was instantly revived with full blood, happily put the wood carving in his arms, then hugged the bear and put it around his neck, and said with a smile, "Brother is jealous of me, we are father and son, son, let's go, Dad will take you to ride a horse go." It is said to be riding a horse, but in fact it is riding on the father, driving the little bear around the room around his neck. At first, the little bear was nervously clutching Chihayron's hair, but later he realized that the feeling of being condescending was not too good, and soon he started laughing, and while shaking his buttocks behind him, he reached out to pat Chihayron's head, making a beep sound. Looking at his envious son, Chi Xiaoyuan gasped in his chest with anger, and scolded, "It's really unseemly, who did you see put his son on his neck? Hurry up and put it down. It's just our family in the room, who knows if we don't tell," Chihayron said with a face full of indifference. But Mu Yangling worried, "Put it down quickly, it's late at night, don't scare the child." Chihayron regretted a bit, and put his son down. The little bear obviously still wanted to play, patted his father's shoulder, grabbed his clothes and put his legs on his legs, and wanted to climb up by himself. Chihayron saw that his elder brother and Aling were staring at him. "I could only hug my son and whisper in his ear, 'My good son, we will play when your mother is not around tomorrow.'" After coaxing him several times in a row, Little Bear reluctantly agreed. After dinner, Chi Xiaoyuan said, "Several national titles have been drafted, and you can take a look later to see which one is suitable. It's best to finalize it early." Chihayron thought for a while and asked, "Is it all there?" "Yes," Chi Xiaoyuan frowned, "it's just that the ministers don't like this word very much, and Chi is the country's surname, so it's the country's name. Historically, country surnames and country titles have been different. The country titles are mostly taken from characters with beautiful meanings, or directly taken from the Book of Changes. Few people directly use the country's surname as the country title. If you look carefully from history, only during the southern and northern dynasties, the name of Chen Qiuqiu was the surname of Kongguo." Chihayron curled his lips and said, "They are just trying to suppress my Qi family, and they don't want the name of the country to follow the surname of the country. What's wrong with Qi? You can say the one who is born with Qi is like Himei. Food is the most important thing, and what we want is for the people to live and work in peace and contentment, which is the most practical thing." Chi Xiaoyuan had preferred the country title of Qi at the beginning, but he hesitated again because of the fierce opposition from the ministers under him. Hearing what his younger brother said, he became firm again, and said in silence for a moment, "Then it will be called De Qi, during the spring and autumn period. Your country of Qi is a country of vassals, but our great Qi is sure to be able to unify the country, forever and ever." Chihayron smiled, his whole body exuded a glow of confidence. "Don't worry, elder brother, younger brother will definitely help you regain the country." Chi Xiaoyuan laughed loudly, patted him on the shoulder and said, "Okay, we brothers will work together." From then on, the title of Daki was established. The two brothers quickly moved the battlefield to the study room with the jug in hand. The two left a message that they would sleep on their feet at night. Mu Yangling heard the words and went back with the little bear in his arms. Li Jinghua also took Xiao Bao to bed early. The West Mansion quickly quieted down, but the people in the East Mansion couldn't fall asleep anyway. Mrs. Wu and her son and daughter-in-law sat in the flower hall watching over a table of cold food. Her face was a little gloomy. She waved her hand and said, "Let's go, we won't be able to have the reunion dinner tonight." The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 580. Chi Saitai was indignant. Even if they are high and powerful now, there is no reason for them to disrespect their mother. Are they not afraid that people will say that they are not filial? Qi Shaosheng clenched his fists involuntarily, looked at his mother in a little bewilderment, and asked with difficulty, "Mother, do you think he will deny our identity as a legitimate son?" "Why?" Chi Saitai jumped up, "Mother is father's stepmother, why does he deny our identity as the legitimate son?" "Shut up," Wu stopped Chi Saitai in embarrassment, and said in a low voice, "Aren't you afraid that others don't know? Their identities are not what they used to be, and if he doesn't recognize them, what can we do?" Speaking of this, Wu couldn't help feeling resentful, saying that her husband depends on her son. Her two sons are obviously older than Qi Heiran, but they have not achieved anything up to now. Qi Shaosheng is just a scholar, Qi Xiaotai simply has a Tongsheng did not pass the exam. I thought we could take advantage of Qi Xiaoyuan's wind as a shareholder to run a force in the capital while they were fighting abroad, so that Qi Xiaoyuan would be able to negotiate terms with him when he was rewarded for his meritorious deeds. But as soon as Qi Xiaoyuan walked forward, he surrounded the Qi mansion with his back foot. Not only their female relatives could not get out, but even the two sons could not step out of the mansion gate. It was said to be protection, but who didn't know that it was to guard against them? Qi Xiaoyuan went out to fight for a year, and they were imprisoned for a year. Even if Li Jinghua and others came back later, they still couldn't get out. The two sons are still dreaming about waiting for Qi Xiaoyuan to become the emperor and become a prince, but she knows not to think about it. But she had a glimmer of hope in her heart, and felt that the Qi brothers would care about their reputation and treat her as a mother with a better face. At that time, even if the two sons could not be crowned princes, a duke would always be indispensable. With the Empress Dowager taking care of her, life should not be too bad. But today Qi Heiran returned triumphantly. It is reasonable to say that she should have greeted her as a mother before returning to the yard. They were dismissed without even seeing her. It can be seen that brother Qi Xiaoyuan didn't even intend to recognize the identity of her aunt. Even if Qi Xiaoyuan is the emperor, his stepson does not recognize his stepmother. He cannot justify it in terms of ethics, but she still dare not refute loudly, because she knows that her stepmother is not righteous. Only her name is registered on the clan, but she is still a noble concubine on the documents of the Yamen. Moreover, many people know this secret. If Qi Xiaoyuan refuses to admit it, they will have nothing to do with him. If even the last identity that could restrain Qi Xiaoyuan's brothers is gone, how much does Qi Xiaoyuan have scruples about them? No one knew how much Qi Xiaoyuan hated her. Looking at the two sons who were still angry, Wu did not express his fear of Qi Xiaoyuan. Now she only hopes that Qi Xiaoyuan can be scruples about the public opinion, and don't do it too ugly. Qi Heiran didn't go to see Mrs. Wu the next day. He went directly to the palace with Qi Xiaoyuan after breakfast. Seeing that his complexion was normal, Qi Xiaoyuan felt relieved, and did not take the initiative to bring up this matter, but he did not know that Qi Heiran had long forgotten about the Wu family, and now that the East and the West have been separated, how could he possibly think of someone if he did not come near him? Zijin is now in charge of all the food, grass, and armaments of the Qi family army, and it is very difficult. Do you think you will follow me or him when you come back? Qi Heiran hesitated for a moment and said, "Brother, are you short of manpower?" Looking at his expression, Qi Xiaoyuan knew what he was thinking, and said, "I know you are impatient with the officials in the court, but you still have to do what you have to do. You can follow Zijin. In the future, you still have to lead the army outside and learn from him. It's also good to learn about management, but you must come when I call you here." Qi Heiran breathed a sigh of relief and nodded hastily. Where is it so easy to start a new country? Taxes, laws, and even rituals have to be changed. Although these can be postponed for 2 or 3 years, they must be discussed from now on. The most important thing is to let the people in exile settle down first. They have no land and no food, so they have to distribute the land and allocate food for relief. Because some places have more people and less land, and some places have less people and more land, the distribution of Yanjai land is also different. It is necessary to find ways to move people who are willing to migrate to places with more land and less land. The national treasury has limited food and silver, and after doing this, the entire country will be emptied. So what will happen next year or the next year? So we can only stagger the tax-free year slightly, and we have to find ways to generate income. In short, there are a lot of miscellaneous things. Just after one problem is solved, another minister below took the paperwork and raised another problem. Although everything was going on in an orderly manner, the trivial matters made even Chi Ziyuan, a good-natured and prudent person, a little irritable, let alone Chi Heiran, who could not sit in a chair for half an hour. After listening drowsily all morning, he ran out to find Fan Zaijian on the pretext of inspecting the military equipment. Chi Ziyuan sighed, feeling that there are too few people available. Heiran is not good at these, and he can't pressure him to help here. Fan Zaijian's side will be much easier, and the most difficult period is over. When the battle was in full swing, Fan Zaijian had a record of not sleeping for 3 days and 3 nights, so when the war was over, he was very comfortable leaning on a chair with a pot of tea to read the books. The Qi family army is not small now, and the national treasury can't give a penny to the army, so it depends on him to support it. It needs to be careful in scheduling, but because he came up with a plan before, it has become a common practice, so need to hand it over to the officials of the military department below. He is only responsible for supervision and inspection. Fan Zaijian came and went here with people from the military department. Everyone greeted Chi Heiran respectfully when they saw Chi Heiran, and then did whatever they should do. Seeing that Fan Zaijian was so leisurely here, Chi Heiran was very envious. Brother asked me to learn how to manage the rear, and I will need it when I go out for an expedition. Fan Zaijian threw a booklet to him and said, "You should learn to read the ledger first." Chi Heiran flipped through it, then threw it aside irritably, and muttered, "I hate reading these things the most. Even if I learn them now, I can't learn them." Fan Zaijian glanced at him. Chi Heiran looked up and saw him lazily nestled in the chair. It was already early summer, but there was still a blanket under it, and looking at the jacket on his body, he stretched out his hand and squeezed his hand. He frowned and said, "Why are you so thin? Don't hurt your body." "I'm lucky, I didn't hurt my body, but I'm a little afraid of the cold," Fan Zaijian said indifferently. "Don't you and your eldest cousin also have hidden injuries? I just got out of shape from being busy a while ago. Just take care of it for a while." Chi Heiran rolled up the account book on the table, and said, "I'll take it home and read it. Since there are old rules to follow, then don't sit here, just leave it to the people below. Go back and rest." Fan Zaijian shook his head. "It's annoying to see them when I go home. Why not stay here? You go back, spend more time with Little Bear, and tell him I'll go see him at night." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 581. Chi Heiran ran home after scrolling through 2 account books, picked up his son who was hugging Mu Yangling's chest, and said dissatisfiedly, "He is already 1 year old, why is he still breastfeeding? He quit it?" Mu Yangling hurriedly snatched the child away, patted him on the back comfortingly, stared at Chi Heiran and said, "What nonsense are you talking about? Xiaobao is still breastfeeding now." Chi Heiran smacked his mouth. "You won't feed him until he's 2 years old, too. Then you have to quit after he is 1 year old." Mu Yangling gave Little Bear a small toy, asked him to play aside, and asked, "Why are you back?" Chi Heiran showed her the account book. "Find me an accountant and ask him to teach me how to read the account book. Also, go to the warehouse to see if there are any good medicinal materials, and send some to Zaijian later." Chi Heiran said sadly, "It's been a long time since I saw him, and he's lost his shape." "Because I was busy a while ago. Don't worry, it will be fine if you take care of it for a while. Now we can invite the imperial doctor as we please, and there is one in the Fan family now." This made Chi Heiran feel better, but he also wanted to learn how to read the account books as soon as possible, so that he could share a little for his eldest brother and Zaijian. But he obviously overestimated himself. In 3 days, Chi Heiran changed 3 accountants. Resigned. Chi Heiran has always made up his mind to do something and always pushes hard in that direction, so even if he doesn't understand him, he is very good at asking for leave, but the masters have taught him several times, and they are obviously similar. Chi Heiran didn't understand the form. It didn't take long, they retreated in just one day, because they didn't dare to fool around, so they had no choice but to give up this opportunity. At the beginning, Mu Yangling suspected that the method taught by those accountants was wrong, so he went to teach him personally. After a long time, Mu Yangling looked at Chi Heiran, who was full of distress and clutched the pen holder speechlessly. Said, "Heiran, this account management is not suitable for you. You have a specialization in the art field. You might as well find a few accountants to help you. You only need to be in charge of dispatching. But it will inevitably be fooled. Military and political affairs, who dares to fool you? If it is impossible to set up a supervisory agency, can they just hide it from you alone? As long as the system is perfect, the risk can be minimized, which is better than learning to read the books. Strong, and still can't understand." Mu Yangling swallowed the last sentence. Chi Heiran lowered his head and thought deeply. In the evening, Chi Ziyuan and Fan Zijin came back for dinner together. Seeing that Chi Heiran was playing with his two children alive and well, he asked Li Jinghua curiously, "This kid has always been stubborn, who can stop him?" Chi Ziyuan never thought that his younger brother could learn to read the account books. Li Jinghua laughed and said, "Aling went to persuade him, and he has been persuading him for a long time." Chi Ziyuan breathed out, "That's good. I'll take him into the palace tomorrow. If he can't learn from the account books, he can always learn other things. It just so happens that prefects from all over the country are going to Beijing to report on their duties, so let him learn from them." Chi Heiran turned his head and said to Fan Zijin, "You also go. When the time comes, you will release your qualifications first." Fan Zijin pursed his lips in disdain, "Big cousin, do I still need my qualifications? I have a headache for those local government affairs, so I might as well make money to fill the national treasury. Now that the country is newly built, there is really no need to follow the old system for appointing people, just use them if you have talents." Chi Ziyuan laughed and said, "Could it be that you still want to be the prime minister as soon as you come up? The prime minister has too many things to manage, and I can't do it. Big cousin, you should let me take care of the household department. I guarantee that within 10 years, the treasury will be full of coins and the granary will be full. Even if I am tax-free for 3 years, lower taxes." Fan Zijin choked, and said after a while, "Actually, businessmen are the richest. However, the tax is too heavy, and merchants may not be in business again. Moreover, how many people in this world are in business? Not one person out of 100 may be in business, and it would be another level of unfairness if taxes were placed on that one person. Moreover, the business tax is too heavy, the more people evade taxes, and the more people abandon business. Although Chi Ziyuan despises businessmen, he will not underestimate their role. If their Chi family army can survive, don't half of them rely on Fan Zijin to do business?" Seeing that Fan Zijin was scratching his head and trying to think of something, Chi Ziyuan pressed his hands and said, "Zijin, when I ascend the throne, you can follow Heiran to the front line, hand over your business to the steward, and follow Heiran seriously. Let's go." Fan Zijin was stunned, and said, "Big cousin, I still have to accumulate meritorious service? You just make me an official in the household department." Chi Ziyuan said seriously, "Don't you just want to be the head of the household department? With your current mentality, I don't feel at ease to hand over the position of household secretary to you in another 20 years." Seeing Fan Zijin's unconvinced face, he sighed and said, "Your talent is unquestionable, but what I want you to learn is mentality and virtue. Zijin, how big a heart is, can take up so much responsibility. Heiran has a benevolent heart, but his talent is only on the way to war, the other is to hold a knife to force him to learn. I only have one person, and Xiaobao is still young, there must be some help. Although Chi Ziyuan didn't finish his sentence, the meaning was obvious. He preferred Fan Zhaijin to help him, and with such high hopes, it was only a matter of time before Fan Zhaijin would become famous. Fan Zhaijin fell silent. It was impossible for him not to be tempted, but he wanted to do what he liked, such as doing business. If it is said that the purpose of doing business at the beginning was to get some pocket money for him and Chi Heiran, and to get some food and grass for the 5th camp, then it was to get armaments for the entire West camp, and now it was to support the Chi family army, but he fell in love with this business a long time ago. He feels that officialdom is not as attractive as shopping malls. But he also knew that only good ministers and beautiful generals have been famous through the ages, and no businessman has ever been famous in history books. Fan Zhaijin is a businessman, but he is also a scholar. No scholar can refuse the temptation of being famous in history. He knew that the reason why Chi Ziyuan didn't want to promote him to a high position at this time was nothing more than the bottom line. Except for a few people, he seldom cares about himself. In order to make a profit, he can do whatever he can, but if he is an official, this is obviously not acceptable. There are cruel methods, but the benevolence of an official is not enough. No. Without the benevolence to tolerate the people, isn't that just another Qin prime minister? Fan Zhaijin thought about it for several days, and Chi Heiran asked puzzledly, "You can strategize in the mall, and you can also find that feeling in the officialdom. Why do you have to be on it?" Fan Zhaijin glanced at him, and said, "What's the difference? I can throw out conspiracies in the mall, and there is no one to suppress them. The business I want to do is rarely impossible to succeed, but it's different in the officialdom. If I frame Zhongliang for my purpose, not to mention Big Cousin, you will be the first to fall out with me." The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 582. Chi Heiran recalled the meaning of these words, jumped up and said, "Even if you are in the mall, you can't frame Zhongliang." Fan Zhaijin rolled his eyes and said, "What kind of loyalty is there in the mall? Fighting is just because you are not good enough. If you lose, you can't implicate the people, but it's different in the officialdom. You will easily implicate innocent people. When the time comes, it's time for you and Big Cousin to hold my ears and read." Chi Heiran always felt that something was wrong, but he couldn't figure it out for a while, so he could only say, "Why do you have to frame Zhongliang?" Fan Zhaijin said quietly, "For the benefit, if they get in the way, I can only clean it up." That's why the eldest cousin said that he has no bottom line, and Fan Zhaijin also knows that he is crooked, but what should he do if he can't change it? Fan Zhaijin looked Chi Heiran up and down, sighed quietly, but he and Chi Heiran were brothers. Chi Heiran had a sense of justice in his heart, and he was a bit stupid. He really didn't want to go too far, and one day the brothers would turn against each other. Chi Heiran came to his senses, patted his chest and said, "It's okay, didn't elder brother ask you to follow me, and I will supervise you when the time comes, and I will definitely not ask you to do anything against nature and reason." Fan Zhaijin opened his mouth, wanting to say that it was because of this that he was not willing to follow you, but seeing that Chi Heiran was already excitedly planning what to do next, he could only swallow what he had to say. Mu Yangling believed in Fan Zhaijin's character very much. After listening to Chi Heiran's broadcast, he said indifferently, "Zhaijin values brotherhood, and with you and elder brother taking care of him from time to time, he won't go astray." Chi Heiran never thinks that Fan Zhaijin is crooked. In his opinion, Fan Zhaijin is a very good person. He nodded vigorously, "So I don't understand why Big Brother is always so worried about Zhaijin going the wrong way, he is so good." Mu Yangling patted his arm and said, "Smart people think about things differently from us, as long as we know that Zhaijin is good." Chi Heiran was dissatisfied and said, "Isn't the master smart?" "You're smart, but we all only have a 5-aperture mind. Big Brother and Zhaijin have a 7-aperture exquisite mind, so they're much smarter than us." Chi Heiran was taken aback for a moment, and asked, I've only heard the saying of the exquisite heart with 7 apertures, and the heart with 5 apertures. Mu Yangling looked at him contemptuously and said, ordinary people have 5 orifices, but saints have 7 orifices. You don't even know this illusion. Chi Heiran touched his nose and muttered, who would pay attention to this? Then he said, then you also only have 5 orifices, and we are just right for each other. Mu Yangling saw that his eyes were shining brightly, and that the hands under the quilt were no longer honest, so he grabbed his hand and said, don't mess around, it's agreed, sleep well tonight, tomorrow is your son's JoJo feast. Don't worry, my master will wake you up early tomorrow morning, and I won't let you get up late. After finishing speaking, she rolled over and pressed down on the person under her, gagged her mouth, and prevented her from uttering objections. The next day Mu Yangling was woken up against the clock. Chi Heiran gave her a flattering smile and said, come on, I'll help you get dressed. Mu Yangling turned his head and glanced at the hourglass. Seeing that it was not too late, he breathed a sigh of relief, pulled off his clothes and said, turn around, I will wear it myself. Chi Heiran turned his back regretfully. After Mu Yangling finished dressing, Chi Heiran wrung out the towel to wipe her face. Mu Yangling didn't forgive him yesterday until he was in front of the dressing table and saw him being so careful. Meng Lang at night. Seeing Mu Yangling's lips pursed slightly, Chi Heiran knew that she was not angry anymore, so he hurriedly opened the door and let Li Shun come in to help Mu Yangling comb his hair, while he sat on a chair drinking tea and watching her. Mu Yangling saw it in the mirror and said, why do you drink tea early in the morning? Didn't you ask you to prepare boiled water in the house? Drink some boiled water in the morning, and then drink tea half an hour after breakfast. Because there are always people around her who are not in good health, Mu Yangling has always paid attention to health preservation. She doesn't drink tea in the morning and before going to bed at night, but only drinks boiled water. Chi Heiran also follows her habit. Li Chun paused, and said with a smile, I'm afraid the new girl here is ignorant, so she made a mistake, and I will tell the slaves to pay attention later. Mu Yangling nodded dispensably. Little Xiong turned over as soon as he opened his eyes, and when he saw that he was not in his own room, he pouted dissatisfiedly. Since his father came back, he would always be carried to the warm pavilion to sleep at night, and he pouted a little dissatisfied. The ass was about to slide off the bed, and the nanny who entered the door saw that she hurriedly stepped forward to wrap him in a blanket, and coaxed softly, third young master, let's put on beautiful clothes first, shall we? Then go to the fourth grandma after we are dressed. The little girl hurriedly brought him the clothes she had prepared earlier. They were all red clothes, red trousers, and a red jacket, and then she put on a red hat. The whole thing was a red doll, very festive. The nurse wanted to hug the little bear, but the little bear wanted to run on his own. Although he was only 1 year old, he ran steadily and fast, and ran to the main house in no time. When Chi Heiran heard the sound, he couldn't help showing a smile. He ran in the yard, and the only one who made such a rapid pedaling sound was Little Bear. Chi Heiran got up and walked to the door when a red child rushed into his arms. Chi Heiran picked him up, took off his hat, rubbed his bald head and said, this dress is so pretty, it makes my son even more handsome. Although Xiao Xiong was small, he could understand words of praise, and immediately hugged his father's neck. It was no wonder that he threw him to the snapper last night. He grabbed Chi Heiran's hair, pulled his shoulders, and wanted to ride up. Without even thinking about it, Chi Heiran put his son on his neck and walked out with all his strength, yelling Tata while walking, let's go, let's catch Joe. Little Bear grabbed Chi Heiran's hand and giggled, and the laughter spread to Zayat Hall. Everyone knew that Little Bear would only laugh like this when he was riding a horse. Xiaobao sat on the couch in a depressed mood and ignored others. Chi Xiaoyuan couldn't help feeling distressed when he saw it. He gritted his teeth at Chi Heiran who was outside, and waved everyone to leave the yard. Li Jinghua was worried that his son would annoy Qi Xiaoyuan, so Qi Xiaoyuan hugged his son and put it on his neck. She froze for a moment, completely speechless. But Xiaobao was very excited, his buttocks were bouncing, he was not a little bear who could only giggle, he could already talk, so he grabbed his father's hair and shouted, "Drive, drive." Li Jinghua, his face changed slightly, and he was about to step forward to stop him, but Qi Xiaoyuan ran out with Xiaobao on his shoulder. Li Jinghua's eyes were slightly wet, she lowered her head and said nothing. Qi Heiran was bringing the little bear over, and seeing that the maids and women of Zayatang were all outside the yard, he asked curiously, "Why are you all here?" The servants looked at each other, and they didn't know why they were kicked out. Seeing them so dumb, Qi Heiran pouted, pushed the door open by himself, and bent down to go in. "If you don't bend down, what if you bump into your son?" As soon as he entered, he ran into Qi Xiaoyuan, who was flying around the yard with Xiaobao face to face.